doing?
Good. Doing great. We're both sweating a little bit.
Sweating my goods off right now, trying to keep your pace.
You're the one carrying the pack today, so.
That's true. I would give it over to you, but you don't want the back
No.
slash that it's conjured up now.
Yeah.
It's pretty juicy. Let's go ahead and open up with a high quality joke.
Okay.
This one's homemade, so hold on tight. What language does a goose on your front stoop speak?
A goose on your front stoop?
Portuguese.
Oh gosh. That might be
whatever.
That might be the worst one yet.
Yeah, right. The fact that you didn't guess it, all right? That one was an easy one.
I have to hold off on the guess.
Yeah.
Don't want to ruin the punchline. But I like that you used the word stoop. Because you can't use the front porch.
Right, yeah. That's what I thought was going to give it away, all right? Yeah. Anyway. Yeah, so the topic that I was thinking about the last couple of days is, when is it none of your business?
When is it none of your business?
When is it none of your business?
Okay, explain yourself a little bit.
Yeah, so I've got a buddy that is going through a divorce right now, and he's the friend more so in this relationship than his spouse.
To you.
To me. And but I've seen a little bit of their interactions and heard some of the decision making on what they're gonna do with their divorce. And the more I hear about it, the more I'm like, oh, those are bad ideas. They're not going to be good for him, which is fine because it's a divorce. Like that's not what those are designed for, right? It's not really for each other, but more so for the kids and the things that I know as a consequence of being a child of divorced parents and how they divorced, what their decision making was, and that cascades down to me, right? And I'm seeing some of those same decisions being made in this relationship. And as much as I could tell him, hey, dude, this isn't going to be good.
Yeah. She's
the one that's kind of in the driver's seat. And I almost want to be like, hey, what are you doing? Yeah, to her.
Okay.
And I don't have any kind of investment in that relationship that would, permit. I don't have influence in that relationship. But at the same time, I'm like, I feel this like stirring inside. And is it just my own emotions from my own stuff? Or is it, God saying, hey, speak to this lady because you might have a little bit of insight that could help some portion of what's going on in their relationship or with their kids. So that's the question I have is it doesn't really feel like it's my business, but at the same time, I don't know where that line is. Like, when do you step in and say something?
That's a really great question, Chase. I'm thinking of like other situations in my own life right now of places where maybe I stepped in a little bit more than I should have and places where maybe I didn't step in enough in terms of like measuring myself as a good friend or brother or spouse or father or whatever.
Right, yeah.
Right. And the one thought that's coming to my mind right now, we talk about this a lot, but actually I think it fits really well here for what you're saying is a couple of things. One is the decision to step into something like that has a couple of principles in play that I think always need to be at least checked and questioned. One is my value system as I run it through what I think my higher power or God would want me to do. And am I willing to go do something even when I know it might not turn out great because that's still the right thing for me to do?
Right, yeah.
That. And then also gauging what kind of currency do I have in the particular relationship that I feel like I'd be meddling in or that I'd be trying to help influence. And what we do know is, I'm thinking of the Anatomy of Peace, the pyramid of influence says that, most of us want to spend our time in correction mode
At the top.
offering all of our wisdom and everything that we're going to do to make them a better person or whatever, when in reality, the most effective people are people who start at the bottom of this pyramid. And the bottom is getting a heart at peace towards the person first, then developing relationships with other people who influence the person, then developing a relationship with the person, then learning about their world and what it's actually making them tick and why they're making the decisions they're making. Then maybe we can teach and communicate, and then maybe we can do some correction.
Yeah.
And so what it sounds like your situation is there's something inside of you seeing this train wreck that's way out there. You recognize how helpless you actually are to the situation because you don't have the bottom parts of the pyramid, but you also feel compelled to trying to do some of the top parts of the pyramid because you don't want the train wreck to happen for them, at least in your vision, right? Of course, you're talking about your own judgments here.
Yeah.
So then it puts you in a position, if I'm understanding that right, of what's the most effective thing for me to do in loving my two friends?
Yes.
And am I willing to go to this, the partner, the wife that you're not quite as close with as the husband, and go and say, can you go with a heart at peace and say, I know that this isn't gonna maybe go well for you, but this is what I see and I care enough to say it, and run the risk that she'll never want to talk to you again.
Right. Yeah.
And is it worth it?
Man, that's a good question.
Because the truth is that in many ways it is none of your business.
Yes, exactly.
Right.
And I don't have all the bits and pieces of information as to why they're doing some of the things that they're doing. Maybe there's plenty of good reason, but some of the things that stack up,
and she doesn't owe you anything in terms of an explanation.
Yeah, it's like, and that's maybe a part of it too. It's like I feel like, well, I need more information in order to help her make her decision.
Yeah.
Like, and who the F am I?
But the flip side to that is that you're looking at it from a completely different lens and angle because you don't have all of that information.
Yeah.
That might still be valuable to both her or him.
Right.
Because you're looking at it from a totally different lens and you're not maybe wrapped up in it the way that they are. So is it worth the gift you're offering of perspective?
Yeah.
And is there a way to balance trying to be curious and supportive and loving and at least keeping a heart at peace, even though you don't have the rest of the pyramid built, to run the risk of losing that friendship by looking arrogant or judgmental or whatever else?
Yeah. Oh man, that's good insight. And at least at this point right now, it doesn't seem like there's enough of a friendship to be concerned about.
Yeah.
It's
How much
like,
time do you have before these kinds of decisions are made?
I think they're already in motion.
Oh, yeah.
Like, but at the same time, there's a book by Warren Farrell that I haven't listened to the book, but I've heard him share the 8 principles or whatever. It's the 4 do's and don'ts of divorce. And when he was sharing the 8 principles on this podcast, it's a long form podcast, and everything that he said, I was like, man, that would have made my childhood so much better.
If in the divorce of your parents?
In the divorce of my parents, and same with my siblings, if my parents could have had this book and listened to those principles, applied them, one of them being the proximity of the father and mother.
Yeah, staying close enough together.
Having, I think he even says a radius of a 15-minute drive.
Yeah,
right?
wow.
And that seems like a pretty specific thing to ask, but it's being able to have accessibility to both of the parents. Like, I didn't really have my dad in my life.
Yeah.
He was
halfway across the country.
Yeah, he's on the other side of the country, and not knocking it or anything, but it left a huge void.
Yeah.
And I think about the exact situation this family is about to engage in, and it's man, you just don't want kids to have to go through that kind of stuff when
Yeah.
it could have been averted, you know.
Yeah.
And yeah,
How do you think it would be received
not well.
if you were to like write a note and hand out the book?
I thought about doing that and giving it to maybe both
both.
him and her, and genuinely, because I think it's valuable information,
Yeah.
and they're stepping into totally new terrain.
Yeah,
right now.
something that's heartfelt, like, hey, I've been thinking about you and you've been on my mind, and I happened to hear this and thought it might be helpful for the struggles I see you in.
Yeah.
That's still a risk, and maybe
Yeah.
they take the book and burn it,
Yeah.
you know. but it's also there's no harm in that, especially if it's shared and conveyed with a heart of care. You know,
Right.
I think both of them, especially with inevitably what they must be going through, probably just need an added measure of care and compassion in the midst of whatever the extra struggles are that they're going through. That seems like a pretty non-risky way of trying to have some level of support. Much
Yeah.
better than going to her and being like, hey, I listen to this podcast. You're doing 7 of the 8 things wrong. So, like that's, I think you got a better shot of something that's maybe a little bit more passive than that.
The old sucker punch.
You could come to me because of our relationship, and you could be like, hey, Tyler, like, you're screwing everything up, man. Like,
Right.
if I was in your friend's position, you'd be like, what are you doing? Like,
Yeah, right.
you
right.
got 4 girls that need you to stay close to them, right? Like, and I would take that with a different grain of salt than it sounds like this relationship would.
Yeah. Which, I mean, to that point, we did that mask activity a couple weeks ago, and it's essentially take a punch at your friend, and they just have to sit there and thank you, sir, may I have another?
Thank you.
Yeah, thank you.
Thank you for the feedback. Yeah.
And I took a jab at you, so you took it well. Here we are. I don't know, maybe you have hard feelings, but not that I can tell.
No.
So you're right about that pyramid of influence. That's a good point. That's maybe a graphic that we should pull up and share. Every time I look at them, like, this makes so much sense.
Yeah.
Why do I try and skip to the top?
Well, we do it all the time. I do it all the time with my kids.
Yeah.
You can almost like gauge where I'm at in the pyramid because I go and try to correct one of my kids over something, and just by the amount of sass they give me back, it's like, oh, I got to go start back down to get to know their world by piece,
Time for some investment.
It's like, oh dang, I got to put some more. Yeah, I got to put some more into the relationship before I can try to extract out. And it happens with my clients all the time too. I get so, it's this balance of push for change and acceptance, and I get so excited about the push for change that you can kind of tell when you're losing a client sometimes, because they start either kind of shutting down or they start getting defensive, and then you're like, oh yeah, I have to spend a little bit more time on the cultivation of the relationship before I can do any of this pushing.
Yeah. Does that have a lot to do with the maybe sensitivity of the client, or I
think that's part of it. I think it's the level of trust you have with the client and relationship, but then it's also, every person's a little bit different, and everyone's going to receive things a little bit differently, right? Especially when it comes from certain places, like, I may not have a great, deep relationship with a particular client, but if I even have the very bottom of the pyramid, which is just a heart at peace, sometimes you can convey the heart of peace through the energy with which you present something enough that they hear it and go, ugh, like, I don't like that I heard that, but they leave and they go, I'll at least think about it.
Yeah.
Because I sensed that it was coming from a place of
sincerity.
Genuine sincerity, concern. I received a piece of feedback this week via an email about something that a client didn't like about what I was doing, and I could tell that the energy of the email was a heart at war, and so part of me is still in a little bit of that heart at war myself, so I haven't seen the need to respond. Right? And when my heart gets back to peace, I may choose to respond or I may not. But if I would have been able to read through that email and go, hey, this person genuinely cares about me and they actually want to sincerely help me. They weren't trying to gratify their own pride. I would be so much more receptive to going, let me think about that.
Yeah.
Let me not only think about it, but let me respond to that.
Yeah.
You know, and so that, I think that piece really does matter. And I think that's where a lot of us go wrong sometimes. I do it with my kids all the time, where I get stuck in the gratification of my pride or the desire to be seen as the best parent or something. It becomes a selfish motive for why I'm doing what I'm doing. And then that's closely tied to that heart at war concept. At that point, I'm not being very effective with my friends or my kids or my family. And I think I probably make that mistake mostly with my kids, but I do it with other people too. And we almost have to learn how to, I'll give you an example. This happened just yesterday. It was beautiful, beautiful. I was doing a session of EMDR with one of my clients. And EMDR is this weird like journey. It's almost like a small version of the hero's journey inside of an hour with a particular issue a person's having. And this particular client's been seeing me for quite a while. They've made some progress, but we kind of got into a session that was just moving. Like you could feel the energy shifting. You could feel the change happening inside the room. And I had this thought in my head, like, yeah, I'm nailing it. I'm doing so good. And then I got this other impression in my head that was like, get the heck out of my way. You know, and it felt like God was saying like, clear out, buddy. Like, give me some space here. And I'm like, oh, this isn't me. Like this isn't me. This is my client doing their work. And it felt to me like God was in the room too. And God was like trying to get in and be like, Tyler, would you stop making it about you? Like, you don't have to be this person's like savior. Like, she's already got one. Like, it's like, oh yeah, like, so I'm backing myself out. And the more that I started to back myself out and just do the protocol of the therapy, the deeper that therapy went. And I got to be like a witness of this beautiful process, but it took my awareness of saying, this isn't about me, right? And I'm wondering, like in your situation, that's a question that might be worth asking. How much of this is my stuff that I'm kind of having play out with transference in their situation, and how much of my stuff is actually a gift to them? Yeah. Like, that's a question to ask and say, maybe the life experience that I've had is now God pushing me into needing to say something, and how much of this is I'm going to feel better about my own trauma once I tell them how to live their lives. And I don't know if you can even distinguish those things.
That's a really good point. I think it's probably somewhere in the middle, or maybe it keeps on ping-ponging between the two.
Might be the heart that's changing back and forth too.
Yes, exactly. Because I also, it's like the feelings of retribution when you see somebody acting in a certain way, and that's the question, is like, are you doing this because you're trying to get back at him or her or somebody? You
almost can feel the pride of them coming through and seeing the pain that it's going to cause the children and everybody else.
Right, which causes me to be in kind of this state of discomfort where I'm like, I don't think I could approach you because I think it would be a blow up. You know? And
right.
That there wouldn't be any receptivity. So I like your idea though of one, getting your heart in the right place, and then two, potentially sharing this book with a note or something simple. And it isn't saying, hey, follow my advice or do what I'm saying, as much as
you're on my mind. Yeah,
like seriously, you, your family, your kids, and in the future that they're gonna have, here's this, and as take it for what it is, which maybe it's nothing for them,
and take it from a place of me caring about you. That's the best you can do if you feel compelled, I think, to doing anything,
right?
And other times at that point you can kind of say, it is none of my business. Oh, those hurt though so bad, especially when you see especially when you see kids involved and go, man, like sometimes going through a divorce like that is so hard, and you get so blinded by the pain of the broken attachment that it really is hard to actually see the forest from the trees with the kids and stuff that are involved, other people. And the best divorces are ones where people actually can kind of maintain a bigger, broader perspective on things, but it's really difficult.
Yeah, it's so bizarre. I don't know what you're seeing in your own life, but this is maybe the 5th friend in the last year that's getting a divorce in my life, and I'm just kind of dumbfounded at how many of those are happening all around me. And at the same time, knowing and having experienced divorce both as a child of it, but also, an ex-spouse, I'm thinking about the hardship and the pain that people go through with any of that. I mean, it's a heartbreaking process, and truly,
it's hard.
Yeah, that separation,
Yeah, it's funny, the longer I've been, I know this is kind of shifting topics and we can be done here in a second, but the longer I've been doing my job as a marriage therapist, I think the more okay I've become with the fact that certain marriages need to end in divorce.
Yeah, that's interesting.
And this is a weird dialectic, and the more I'm convinced that too many people give up too early. It's weird that both of those things seem to be true, at least in my opinion, at the same time. But I'm more like, yeah, that one probably needs to end because it's abusive or because it's, and a lot of these ones don't need to end yet. Like you're actually subjecting yourself to probably more suffering going the divorce route than, and I think the statistics actually show that when you poll people after divorce, years after divorce, 10 years after divorce, about 75% of people will actually say that they think they could have made their marriage work.
Oh man.
And
ouch.
Yeah, and that's kind of an interesting thought there, that when you're in the thick of the pain, you're looking for any way out. But I think one of the reasons why that stat is there too is because people think that the divorce itself is the solution, when in reality there was two people who needed to look themselves in the mirror and make some changes.
Yeah.
And they think that the divorce will fix it without the looking in the mirror and the making of the changes, and then they end up in a different situation that's very similar to the one they just left. So
down the road they realize I had to do the work either way. Maybe I could have done the work.
It's like, and it would have been easier without paying alimony and child support and having to go through the same struggles that I'm now having in my current relationship. I've gone and added a whole nother level of struggles on top of the fact that I just still needed to make some changes. Now, with that said, again, the dialectic is, and more and more often I'm convinced that divorce is an okay thing for people. Like, and I'm a marriage therapist who got into this because I want to save marriages, and because every time a couple comes through my office, my first thing in the back of my head is, how do we save this? How do we figure this out, right?
How do I get this thing to end as quickly as possible?
No, it's weird. It's a weird dialectic to be constantly balancing and living in as a therapist too. So anyway, I know that was kind of a side note, but
no. Well, I appreciate the insight. I mean,
good topic.
I think that's gonna be helpful. And,
yeah.
And I like the Anatomy of Peace keeps coming back up. I'm like, that freaking book that needs to be my Bible for a little while.
Yeah, that book's phenomenal. And I also think, good on you for being a good friend, and for actually thinking about these and asking these kinds of questions. And I don't think anyone, if anybody came to me with a sincerely written note, I care about you, take it or leave it, it's none of my business, like, I don't think you go wrong with that. Because you're at a bare minimum, you're showing care and concern. They can crack open the book or not.
Yeah.
I remember one time we received a book from somebody that It was a big note in the front that was like, I hope that you read every word of this because you need to listen to this stuff. That book is still on my bookshelf and never been cracked open. I didn't get past the note.
Right.
You know?
It wasn't as heartfelt as it could have been, it
But
sounds
if
like.
the note would have been like, man, I love you so much, and I've been thinking of you, and this might really be something helpful because it's been really impactful and helpful for me. I probably would have cracked that thing open and like read it, you know, and, like
Dove right
probably
in.
applied all the principles. It took me like 10 years later to actually go listen to the book and go, man, that's a phenomenal book. You know? Like, oh good, I'm glad I got it on the shelf. I can recommend it now. So yeah.
That's great.
So anyway.
Yeah. All right. Well, thanks for the insight, man.
Yeah, it's a good one.